Hey, we're really glad that you're here today. If you're watching online, we miss you a lot. We wish you were here, but have fun doing whatever it is you're doing. The mission statement of our church, the mission of our church, not just the statement, the mission of our church is to help everybody take their next step closer to Jesus. And I hope that you have something in mind that you could do, something that would be helpful, something that would draw you closer to Jesus, draw you into a deeper connection with him, to help you center in this world, to help you be who he created you to be in this world. It's all about that. It's about your flourishing and your well-being and your goodness, even though life is challenging and hard. That's our mission. Did you guys see the news this week? There's always so much news, and sometimes it's just like you filter it out. It's just like, it's too much. I can't handle it. But did you see that dramatic rescue, the 16-year-old lifeguard that rescued the kid out of the surf, the 10-year-old boy out of the surf? If you didn't see it, I'm actually going to show you a video here in a second, but I just wanted to set it up. It's in Santa Cruz, Seabright Beach, and the water's not very deep, but if you've ever been in like choppy water where there's these cross waves breaking, where they're breaking from two different sides, and they come at these strange intervals, and you can't get your feet under you, and this 10-year-old kid is struggling, and he begins to drown, and this lifeguard goes out to rescue him. And this video is about everybody lives, everybody's fine, no need for trigger warnings there, but I want you to watch this video just because I want this sense of rescue to be in your mind. So if you'd go ahead and play that video for us. There should be that's a picture, but there should be a moving picture. We got audio, all right? We're getting closer and closer. If not, I'll have to describe the dramatic rescue to you. Our tech team, they're on it back there. While they're working on that, let me set the stage a little bit. When one of my many jobs that I've had over the years, I was a lifeguard, a teenage lifeguard. And I never had to do any dramatic rescue. Here we go. So you'll notice they're not in very deep water. It's relatively shallow as they stand up, but watch the size of these waves that break over them. Now you notice the lifeguard goes under the wave. If you've ever done any water safety, you know to go under the breaking part of the wave, and it just seems like it takes them a long time to finally resurface. And he's still got a hold of this 10-year-old. He's still holding on to him. Now watch this. This civilian comes to help because they're both struggling, another civilian, but watch him run away as another wave comes in. And the helper that came to help the lifeguard and the boy get separated from them again. He's like reaching out. The lifeguard says, I've got this. I'm going to help him. More people come to help, but watch what happens when another wave comes in. They get out of there again. And it's only this lifeguard that continues to cling on to the 10-year-old. The lifeguard's name is Ryder Williams. He's commended for his heroism. The boy, his name was Nathaniel. His dad has done an interview just saying, my son would not be here if it hadn't been for the bravery and the heroism of this lifeguard. It's just like you watch this. I've watched this several times this week, and it's just like, it's really moving that the lifeguard would not let the boy go, despite what was happening, despite the waves crashing. I don't know if you've ever swam in the ocean. I grew up around the ocean. You're like in a washing machine spin cycle underneath there. It's tremendously hard to wrap onto someone and hold on to them. It's hard enough to find your own way to the surface, much less have somebody else that you're helping. What a metaphor, right? What a metaphor for seasons of life. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like you were just like, okay, I want to get my feet under me, but life just keeps like plastering me with these 10-foot waves, with problems, with issues, with struggles, and you're just like, I just want to get my feet underneath me, and it can be mental struggles, it can be physical struggles, it can be health struggles, but what a metaphor for certain seasons of life. Some of you have been through the ringer and you get it. You know what that's like. You have been in times of your life where you're like, yes, I could not stand up, and it was hard. I needed every bit of support and prayer. I needed everything. Some of you are like, I've not been through life like that. People talk about it. I hear about it in country songs and blues songs. I've never been through that. Well, guess what? It's coming for you. Nobody escapes life unscathed by the hardships, by just being through it. So it's coming. have fun. Have fun with that. There's our positive message for today. Life is going to be hard for you at some point. We're in a new sermon series, and it's called No Other Gospel. And what we're going to do for the next 6 weeks, we're going to work our way through the book of Galatians. And we're actually going to take a chapter at a time, and rather than just digging through each chapter, we're going to find like this nugget, this core kernel of truth at the center, the heart of each chapter that the author is spelling out. And we're going to try to draw that idea out. And I think it's going to be... I really wrestled with this sermon series. I really prayed, and God just kept impressing on my heart, this is what we need to hear. This is what we as a church need. And so I guess I just want to encourage you to be open and ready for whatever that is. I'm not even sure what it is that he wants us to hear out of this, but here we go. So this sermon series is going to take us through the book of Galatians, and today we're going to focus on chapter 1, and we're going to start in verse 1. Galatians chapter 1, verse 1. He writes this, Paul, he's the author of this letter to this region of Galatia. He says, Paul, I'm an apostle. And he's like, I just want to make it clear from the outset, I was sent not from men. There's no board of guys back home that sent me out with this message. And he says, I wasn't sent by a man. There's no human beings behind what I'm about to share with you. Everything that I'm about to share with you, he uses the word later, was revealed by Jesus Christ. So there's no human origin to this. The Father and God the Father who raised him from the dead, and all the brothers and sisters with me to the churches in Galatia. So this isn't Paul's blog post, it's not his podcast, it's not his tweets, it's not his opinions about Jesus. He's about to reveal something that he says was downloaded to him from God, that he got directly from God. In other words, you're not going to stumble across this. You're not going to wander in an old dusty bookshop and find a perfect book and crack open the perfect page and discover true enlightenment on that page. You're not going to hear a podcast. There's no way you're going to come across this way of knowing reality unless it is given to you by God. That's essentially what he's saying. There's no other way of finding this truth but Jesus. Now, Paul walked around parts of the globe that had never heard about Jesus. And honestly, true story, I would give my little toe to hear Paul share the message to just somebody who had no idea who Jesus was. I don't know how he went from zero to follower of Jesus. I would love to hear that. We get some glimpses of it, but we don't get the process. I would love to know, what did he say? How did he make this make sense? But he had a lot of success, particularly in this region, Galatia. He had a lot of success here. He had great crowds. There's lots of stories that you can read about in the book of Acts that happened, great number of people. And I would imagine what's going on is the Spirit of God is leading him to people who are just being beat up by wave after wave of whatever is going on in their life, and they're looking for something true and real and substantial upon which to build their life. And the Spirit leads Paul to these folks because they're ready and they're open and they're willing to hear what he has to say, what he has been given by Jesus. I think that's probably what's going on. Now, this is, I think, pretty fascinating. I had never heard this before. In all my preaching history and all my, any degrees I've got, I've never heard this before. This blows me away, and it really is not that important, but it blew me away, and I wanted to share it with you. This region, Galatia, it's in modern-day Turkey. It's just an area in Turkey. My ancestry is from a little county in the north part of Ireland, not Northern Ireland, but in the north part of Ireland, Donegal County. That's where my legacy comes from. That's where my dad spent summers at his grandparents' cabin in Donegal County. Beautiful. I've been there. It's awesome. This is where we're from. So Shamrock, right? Appropriately so. We're from up right over there. Our ancestors are Celtic. And they all come from this region in Ireland and England and the west of Europe. They were called Gauls, G-A-U-L, Gauls. They all settled in different places. In 250 BC, a bunch of Gauls moved from Western Europe and made their way into Galatia. That's where the name comes from. So in other words, this region was full of pale-skinned redheads like me. That's who this letter and this group of people was written to. Now, of course, that's almost 300 years later, and who knows exactly who was there. But there was a lot of cultural and archaeological influence from the Celtic people all the way in the Galatian region. I think that's pretty cool. Judging by your response, you do not think it's as cool as I think it is, but I still think it's cool despite it. So it's in this, can you just imagine, the audience to whom Paul is writing is a bunch of people that look like me, I guess. I think that's kind of interesting. All right, Galatians chapter 1, verse 3. This is what he writes to those pale-skinned, sunburnt-prone redheads. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself for our sins to rescue us from the present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father, to whom be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Standard boilerplate Bible verse. You've read Bible verses like this a million times. We just skim right over them because it's just basic stuff. It's just what you say at the beginning of a Bible letter. Nothing special. But if we could crawl inside what Paul is trying to convey to this audience, I think it could be life-changing. Let me give you an example. Just the word rescue, right there in verse 3. The word rescue. It's like being dragged by a wave out into the ocean by riptide, wave after wave, and you can hardly get your breath, much less your footing, and you're overwhelmed by spiritual and mental circumstances. Some of you have experienced that. You've experienced grief so deep that you didn't know if you would ever recover. You've experienced trauma so heavy that you knew it was going to shape you for the rest of your life. And it made you terrified to know that this is who you are now because of this thing that's happened to you, that life has crashed upon you. It's hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. If you experienced it, you're like, yeah, I get it. I've been there. There are times in my life where, I have been in the middle of it. Paul had experienced it. And what he's saying is that Jesus rushed into the churn of the waves and grabbed onto him and pulled him out. That's what he's saying. He was saying, I was trying to find my right way up. I thought I had it by living the old law perfectly and by persecuting Christians. He'll get into this later in the book of Galatians. I thought that I had it all figured out, but Jesus had to come in and pluck me out of that. If you've been through that, you know it. If you haven't, well, welcome to the club because you are going to experience that. And then he also uses this phrase, present evil age. And it's really easy for us as Christians to kind of buy into this idea that he's probably talking about like watching R-rated movies and, whatever's happening, rap lyrics or culture wars or whatever. And that's not what he's talking about at all. This is the stupid stuff Christians get themselves all wrapped up about that doesn't actually have to do anything with anything. This is the stuff Satan loves Christians to get distracted about because it doesn't actually have anything to do with the substance of what it means to be a human and live in the world and love people, but it gets us all worked up about it. That's what we think of when we hear the phrase present evil age, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about a life that is pulling you away from God to destruction. My wife and I were watching one of those Netflix shows that's a documentary. I think the show's called Missing, Dead or Alive. And you get to watch like the day-to-day detectives going through. They get this missing persons report, and you get to see what they do and how they investigate it and all that. It's fascinating. It's not quite the gruesome, grimy, true crime stuff, the sensational stuff. It's just more like basic, like this is life people are going through. And so we're watching this, and you're just like, man, the stuff people get themselves into is crazy. These are just normal people. They're just living life, and something happens in their life that starts to go sideways, and they start to take on habits and behaviors that put them in these high-risk situations, and it's drugs and prostitution and custody battles. I mean, these people are lost and confused, and they're looking for something that will make them feel better, and then they find themselves part of a true crime documentary on Netflix. Now, we might, if we were trying to describe like the feelings that people experience when life is really hard, we would use terms like, modern people like us, we would use terms like existential dread and self-destructive behaviors. We would describe it like angst and restlessness. This is the language that us modern people would use to describe the feelings people have that encourage them to make bad choices and engage in bad behaviors that get them on Netflix. And if we were to try to describe what they're searching for, we would use language like hope and purpose and flourishing. We would use language like wholeness and meaning. This is what people want out of life. They don't need life to be perfect. They don't have to win the lottery, but they just want something that matters and makes sense, and they want to love someone and someone to love them. We would use this kind of language. The Bible layers over this modern language ancient terms, and it uses the terms sin and salvation. But that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the dread that people live life with and then make bad choices that harm themselves and others. The Bible calls sin. That's what it's talking about. And people are looking for, like, what do I do to get myself out of the bed that I've made, the bad choices that I've made myself? What do I do? That's salvation. And here's the crazy thing about the true crime documentaries. Maybe you've experienced this, maybe you haven't. In particular, the series that Karina and I were watching. You watch long enough, and you definitely feel sympathy for the victims. They have put themselves in a high-risk situation, but nobody deserves to go missing or to be mistreated, right? But eventually, you watch long enough, and you start to feel some sympathy for the perpetrators, which is a weird experience because you realize that these people also were handed a raw deal by their parents and grandparents and by life, and they were just looking for something to give them some substance and to stand up, and they engaged in self-destructive behaviors that begin to harm others too. All these people are drowning. That's the problem, and they need someone to come in and rescue them from what they're experiencing. And the simple, beautiful reality is, and the gospel is this, that Jesus rushes in and he drags us out of that. That's the gospel. And those of you that have experienced it, you know that feeling. Some of you have experienced it and forgotten how hard it was, how tough it was, and the amount of sin that you were dragged out of. But that's the gospel. The gospel is Ryder Williams rushing into the surf to hold on and cling on to little Nathaniel and eventually drag him from the water so he could be safe again. That's the gospel. That's good news. Jesus rescues. It is a simple, beautiful reality. He dove into the human mess to rescue us. It's kind of, wryly funny. I don't know if that's the right term, but I was baptized in order to have my sins forgiven. My existential dread and angst and self-destructive behaviors, I was 12 years old. Well, what existential dread does a 12-year-old have? Well, they've got the amount that a 12-year-old can have. They've got the appropriate level. And what I didn't realize is that as a 12-year-old, Jesus would rescue me out of the surf, and then later in my life, I would wander right back in. And Jesus would have to pull me out again. And then later, I'd wander right back in, and he would have to pull me out again. My nephew, Julian, is here. I wasn't going to use this story, but he's here. He's got the bright pink-looking hair, and he's covering his face because he might know the story I'm about to tell. But when he was younger, he and my nieces and nephews were all younger. I'm glad you dyed your hair for my sermon this morning. That was very helpful so everybody could pick you out of a crowd. When my kids and my nieces and nephews were younger, we took them over to Great Wolf Lodge to go swimming. Uncle was going to be the cool uncle, and he's going to, let's all go swimming. And so we walk in, and Julian's got a couple of older siblings and a younger sibling, and I talk to them. They're all pretty young at this point. Julian's maybe 7 or 8, and I said, Julian, you know how to swim? And he's like, yeah, I got this. I'm like, okay. All right, I trust you. So Julian walked right over to the lazy river, which is about 3 feet deep, walked off the edge, and immediately started drowning. And at first I was like, is he pranking me? No, I think he's drowning. So I pull him out, and I'm like, hey, I thought you said you could swim. Like, oh, yeah, I've got this. Like, okay, well, don't do that. Because I just had to rescue you out of the lazy river. That would be the most embarrassing place to drown. So I let him go again, and we go over to the zero entry part of the pool. It's kind of the wave pool area, and no waves are happening right now. And so he walks in, and I'm watching him, and I'm like, surely he's not going to walk in over his head. He's going to stay where he can splash around. Sure enough, he just marches right in, goes right over his head, and starts doing this again. And I rush out there, and I'm like, Julian, what are you doing? That has to feel like Jesus. Like all the times that we continue to re-engage in self-destructive behavior after he has pulled us from the waves. But that's the good news of the gospel, is that he will continue to protect us and rescue us. That's the good news. And Julian is here because I rescued him multiple times. Yes, thank you. I'm genuinely surprised that my nieces and nephews are all alive, just knowing their background and history. So Jesus rescues. Simple, beautiful reality, right? It's smooth sailing from here on out. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. End of story. Well, no. Typically, Paul, in his letters, as he writes, he's a pretty pointed guy, but he's got a heart for people. And so when he writes these letters, he usually says something like, hey guys, I've been thinking about you. I've been praying for you. I've heard all this good stuff going on in your lives. It's all this like nice encouragement, and it's genuine, but it's always just really thoughtful. And then he'll let that go on 2, 3, 4 chapters, and then he'll say, you know, if there's a few things you could work on, maybe you could take care of this. In Galatians, he lets them have it. He hits them upside the head with the truth in verse 6. He just doesn't give them any fluff. In verse 6, he writes this. He goes, I'm astonished. In fact, the word, he's using sarcasm here. He's like, I'm impressed. I'm impressed that you so quickly jumped back in the ocean and started drowning. Really? I'm so impressed that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which really is no gospel at all. That's where we get our title of our series. He says, evidently some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. He says, but even if I say it, or an angel from heaven should preach to a gospel other than the one we preach to you, that Jesus entered in the ocean and dragged you out, if anybody preaches anything else, then it's Jesus taking care of you, let them be under God's curse. Them's fighting words. Paul's so worked up, he repeats it immediately. As we have said, verse 9, as we have already said, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Maybe we don't curse enough people anymore. Paul certainly felt like it was okay. I mean, he's coming in a little bit hot. He is so mad, he is literally cursing. How many of you have made your parents so mad that they said a naughty word? And you were like, ooh, I have that over my parents now forever and ever, amen. I have never done that. My parents would never, ever say a naughty word. My mom would say fiddlesticks, which I think is a euphemism for something, but we don't want to get into it too much. Paul's coming in hot. I have made my mom mad, by the way. I have made her mad. I've made her face redder than it is. But Paul's so mad, he's literally saying, let there be a curse on anyone who tells you this is not the gospel, Jesus rescuing you. And here's the thing, and I'm going to show you, I think that he's completely justified in being so mad. Here's the thing, false gospels are real, they are destructive, and they are constantly clamoring for our attention and our allegiance. We don't talk about false doctrine, false gospel very often. It's impolite. I don't talk about it very often. It's impolite, right? You don't want to get up here. I grew up in an era where that was 90% of the sermon was the preacher getting up and telling everybody which different groups were wrong. And we don't do that anymore. And I think that there's some blessing to that. But I think the problem is that what we call tolerance is actually indifference. I think we're calling it tolerance because that sounds good, but I think it's masking the fact that I don't really care about you or what you think or believe, or it doesn't matter to me. Go ahead, engage in self-destructive behaviors. It has no bearing on me. It's indifference. We're saying tolerance, but we're meaning something else. And I think we can only afford to be indifferent if we have lost grip on what the gospel actually is. People being saved from their sins. Their self-destructive, existential dread, meaninglessness, purposelessness. If we've lost grip on that, if the gospel is just a set of ideas that you can take or leave, then no wonder we're indifferent when people buy into something that is false. Multiple times as a parent, I don't know if this is Patrick as a parent. I don't know if this is all parents. Maybe this is just male parents. I don't know. But this happened, it still happens to me. When my kids were little, and we would be like going on a walk or something, and then you would see off in the distance, like, dad's kind of scanning for danger, you'd see off in the distance like a dog in somebody's yard. Now, you have no reason to believe that that dog is mean or anything, but I'm immediately going through scenarios like, what if that dog comes at my toddlers? And none of this is happening. This is all imagined, by the way, and it never happened. But I went through the scenarios, and then I would think, if that dog comes at my toddlers, I'm going to gather them behind me, and then I'm going to beat up a dog. Of course, this is all in my mind. If it actually happened, who knows? Hopefully, I wouldn't just be running off, Liam, take care of yourself. Be good to your sisters. But I thought about it so many, literally, like, is this a weird thing to confess? I literally thought about what it would be to get a dog in a headlock and wrestle it to the ground, because I didn't want that animal threatening my children. None of that happened. I never had to put a dog in a headlock or anything like that. But it's your brain. It's probably anxiety and, letting your imagination run wild. And I literally thought this thought. I'm confessing too much. I thought this thought. If that dog bites me, I'm going to bite that dog. However vicious that dog is, I will be more vicious. Would it really happen? I don't know. I never had to worry about it, but that's what I thought. Paul is saying there are real false gospels out there, people obscuring the single truth and telling people that there are other ways to have their sins forgiven and to find salvation. And he says, I want to fight that because it is actually causing harm, destruction, damage. See, it's interesting because when you read this, Paul's mad at the false teachers, but he's also mad at the people that he's writing to. Yesterday, we were picking up kids from camp. They had come back on the bus from camp. Bus pulled in. Right before the camp bus got here, a little white Honda pulled in. Behind it came 3 police cars. And so I'm sitting in my office window, I'm waiting for Liam, and all of a sudden I am turned around. This is better than a true crime documentary because it's happening in our parking lot, and I'm like watching this. 3 police cars, 3 teenage boys get out. These boys are probably 16 years old. They all exact same uniform. They're all wearing socks and slides, white shirt, same exact haircut, all look exactly the same. And the cop is like talking to him at the window, and then the cop gets him out of the car. And I'm like, oh, it's getting serious. Boys are getting out of the car, and then they're standing about 3 feet away from the car. And at first I thought they had handcuffs on, but the police officers had told them to put their hands behind their back. So they're standing there with their hands behind their back, and the police officer is in the car pulling out bottle after bottle after bottle of alcohol. And I'm thinking, bad boys, what you gonna do? Cops theme song run through my head. And I'm like, these boys are busted. They are in trouble. And I'm literally watching from my little office window, and then I think, I should probably, so I go outside, and I try to be very respectful. Does anybody need water or soda or anything? I'm trying to this is a church, and we want even the bad boys to feel comfortable coming to church and feel comfortable in our parking lot, even if they're pulling after bottle of underage drinking alcohol situations. So I'm trying to figure out how do you love both the police officers and the kids in this situation. And then I see cars start to pull up with parents in it, and I thought, oh no. Whatever the boys thought was a problem with the police officers, they are about to be in it with the parents. I don't know what the parents said. In fact, I was actually a little disappointed because the parents all seemed chill and laid back. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why your boys are underage drinking and have a bunch of alcohol in their car. You need to be more upset. But they weren't. And they all ended up getting in cars with their parents and taking off. And I don't know what that car was like. But if you've ever had a conversation with your teenager where you were frustrated with them because you knew they could make better choices and they had given into something bad or negative, then you can channel what Paul is feeling here. He's saying, listen, you guys, I'm shocked that you're giving up Jesus so quickly. I'm frustrated with you. I'm frustrated with the choices you're making. Now, what are we talking about when we're talking about false gospels? Let's cruise through this because this is really important. If you've grown up, many of us have lived through, if you're new to church, well, we're just airing dirty laundry here. But some of us have grown up in church eras where every difference was labeled false doctrine. Oh, you use the NIV? Heretic. You worship with a guitar? Heretic. Oh, you don't have Sunday night church? Heretic. Every different doctrine was this deal breaker. And I still know people like this. You may know people like this. Sometimes you have relatives who are in churches like this. They are not fun people to hang out with. They're not. It's just not a fun environment to be in when there's this constant judgment and you're just always worried that you're going to say or do the wrong thing. But false gospels and heretics haven't gone away. It's just more sophisticated. And I'm glad we've moved away from that era where every difference was labeled heresy, because there are only a few things that absolutely do matter. But I like what Eugene Peterson, he's a pastor, an author, and he wrote a book on Galatians called Traveling Light that I've really been enjoying. But he had this section that I thought was so valuable that I wanted to share it with you. He writes this, he goes, "We have never before faced so many heretics, and the quality of our life has never been so bad, which is evidence that far too many people are getting their view of reality from heretics. Today's heretics are well-educated, and they're glamorous, and they're persuasive, and they're insistent, and they're on TikTok and Instagram Reels, I would add. We are appalled, rightly so, that the church once burned heretics. Correct, we don't want to do that anymore. That was a bad idea. But now we make celebrities of them and reward them with six-figure salaries. It was certainly a moral disaster on the part of our ancestors when they got rid of heretics by burning them, but it is, I love this line, it is metaphysical stupidity. It is metaphysical stupidity on our part to applaud their lies. And he says this at the end, our forebears at least knew something was wrong that had to be contested. Our age is so biblically illiterate that we will accept anything provided it is spoken with evident sincerity and accompanied by a big smile." It's good stuff, huh? Woo. Eugene Peterson, man. In Paul's case, what he's actually writing about is that people were adding elements from the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, to their idea of salvation. So they took this idea of like Jesus. Yes, we love Jesus. Jesus is great. Jesus is awesome. He's great. But you need Jesus and a little surgery, a little circumcision, and he's going to get in a lot more into circumcision. So if you're uncomfortable with that, buckle up. He's got some things to say about it. But they were saying this was a practice commanded by God in the Old Testament. So Jesus, yes, but we need to add circumcision to it, and then you can be saved. And this is what Paul's railing against. In other cases, he would point out that you're saying that you have to have Jesus plus eating kosher or Jesus plus Sabbath keeping, and then you can have salvation. It was anything, Jesus plus law keeping was salvation. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things until you put them in that blank and tell people that doing so equals salvation. It's fine. If you want to live a life where you keep the Sabbath and circumcision and you eat kosher, knock yourself out. But if you try to think yourself or tell others that that's how you're saved, Paul's going to have a problem with you. I think we should ask ourselves the question, what are we tempted to add to the gospel? What are we? Our problem isn't circumcision and kosher eating and law keeping. What are we tempted to add to the gospel to make it no gospel at all? I've used this illustration before, but it's been long enough, most of you forgot. I grew up overseas. My parents lived in Taiwan. The staples for food that you can buy at the grocery store are different in other countries. You can't just go to the grocery store and get a gallon of milk, head of lettuce, all that stuff. Every once in a while, my mom would try to make something that was a taste of home. Like, let's make a dish that just reminds us of home. In Taiwan, they don't eat taco salad. That doesn't exist. So my mom decided to make taco salad. We were going to and I have a memory of this. They don't have lettuce. They do have cabbage. So we substituted cabbage for lettuce. Well, okay, it's kind of close. They don't have tortilla chips. Not a lot of corn-based products there. So we substituted rice. They don't have a lot of ground beef. So we substituted pork. They don't have sour cream. Like, at what point is it not taco salad anymore? At what point have you substituted so many ingredients that this is something else entirely? Paul the Apostle says there is one ingredient in salvation, and it is Jesus. Any substitutions make it no gospel at all. What I'm about to say could be easily understood, and I worked hard and prayed to get the wording just right, but willful misunderstanding knows no bounds. So you just have to trust my heart that I love all of you. And don't worry, there's something for everybody to be upset in what I'm about to share. Ready? I think God will rescue the world through Jesus. And you're like, oh, okay, real bold, Patrick. Church on Sunday morning. Yeah, quite the provocateur. I want us to be a church that doesn't add anything else. And I get, by the way, I get the instinct to add things to the formula. I get it. Sometimes it's an attempt to control the behaviors of the people around you, but sometimes it's just a genuine attempt to do what you believe God wants you to do. And there's a genuine, earnest, and sincere instinct. At certain points in our history, in the churches of Christ, we thought, or people indicated, or people taught that you are saved by Jesus and worshiping the right way. In our case, it was typically a cappella worship. You're saved by Jesus, and make sure it's a cappella worship. In some cases, and I heard this taught with my own ears, we taught that we are saved by Jesus and having the right name on the sign out in front of the building. It had to be that name, and if it wasn't that name, it wasn't salvation. I don't know if I internalized this. I don't know that I ever heard anybody say it. Maybe it was just my own brain. But I thought at times that we were saved by Jesus and really knowing more than any of the other religious groups. We could beat all of them at Bible trivia, and God looked at us and said, yeah, those are the guys that I want to populate heaven with me because they know all the answers. They can spell Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz, much less pronounce it. I thought that God was impressed by my Bible knowledge. And really, it could be any reason or any other tradition. Anything that we fill that blank with makes it a false gospel. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with those things, unless you are communicating even in subtle ways that those things somehow get you salvation. I also don't believe that God will rescue the world through politics or legislation or activism or more policies or more systems. There's nothing inherently wrong with those things, most of them, some of them. But when they get put in that blank where we say, hey, Jesus will save you and this thing, then you'll really be saved. There was a study, and it was just released a couple weeks ago, and it kind of set me on my heels, and it was about Gen Z. So Gen Z is anybody born in 1997 to 2012. And I just want to say from the outset, I'm pretty suspicious of anything that categorizes an entire generation and says they all share this opinion. I don't think that's true, but this is the study. They grouped people who were born between 1997 and 2012. So anyone from 14 to 29. And they said, what are the things that prevent you from engaging in church or attending church? Half of Gen Z said it was the perceived political views of churches that they said, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, Gen Z is too idealistic, or they're oversimplifying complex problems, and they just need to get over it. But can you imagine having the opportunity to help someone take their next step toward Jesus only for it to be drowned out by your political posts on Facebook? Can you imagine that? What a tragedy. That would be a tragedy. It hurts my heart to think that some people's witness for a politician is overshadowing their witness for Jesus. Now, you may be thinking, oh, there are important things and people need to make changes and there needs to be transformation. Absolutely. Jesus plus nothing equals salvation and transformation. Jesus will do that work. But when we add anything, we're in trouble. Imagine this. Imagine running up to someone who is drowning in sin, or they're drowning in addiction, or they're drowning in self-destructive behaviors, and they're just beginning to get a glimpse of this idea that there could be hope in Jesus. They're struggling. They can't get their feet under them. They've lost all their energy. This poor kid had no energy left to stand upright. He needed someone else to hold him and carry him. Imagine this scenario where Ryder Williams is trying to help 10-year-old Nathaniel out of the waves, and one of those helpers rushes up. Oh, I just want to make sure you're voting for the right things. Ryder Williams would be like, get right out of here right now. In fact, why don't you go deeper into the ocean? No wonder Paul is so frustrated and upset. No wonder he calls a curse upon people who exchange the truth for a lie, because it's causing real damage in people's lives. Paul was saying, when we add anything to Jesus, we lose everything. Nobody thinks of this of themselves. I think all of us are probably sitting here thinking, yeah, that's not me. I don't do that. Ask your spouse. Ask your Facebook friends. Genuinely, honestly, ask them, hey, do I come off as someone who's just really, truly all about Jesus? Or is it Jesus and a little extra in there? Ask them. Ask them what they think. They might not be honest with you. I don't know. What do people associate with you first? Is it Jesus? Just Jesus and nothing? Or is it Jesus and a little politics? Jesus and a little tradition and a little doctrine? Jesus and a little judgment. What is it? What is it? This is my heart for our church. I want us to be a church that doesn't cling to anything else, just Jesus. I want us to live in the simple beauty of the gospel, that it is Jesus that rescues. We're going to sing a song in closing. I'm going to ask our praise team to come back up and sing. We're going to sing together, Who You Say I Am. I love this song. I love so many of the themes that it develops. But I just hope and pray there may not be anything for you to do other than repent of the ways that you've obscured the gospel with other things. It's just Jesus. And that is what the Woodbury Church is going to be all about.